Today, our young prince is going for an outing at the capital with Asha. Asha was suspicious and asked what they were doing there. Prince Arel assured her that they were here on serious business. He sensed her suspicion because he had been making a lot of major deals lately to prepare for the war. He grabs her arm and yanks her towards a really fancy gate. It's the Royal Academy. They were here to see her little brother, who had just started attending. The Royal Academy is a royal educational institution for noble kids. Higher nobles, however, preferred to hire private tutors, so it's basically for ordinary noble kids. Asha tries to protest, but the prince insists, saying that if he were her brother, he'd be mad that his sister is too busy to see him. But she wasn't okay with just wasting time while everyone else was busy. The prince then asks her to stop being stubborn, as he is not the kind of employer who wouldn't let her go see family. Besides, he had already made various excuses to obtain a visitor's pass, so he forbids her from nagging him today. She still tries to protest though. Then they spot some noble kids, and our prince realizes that he doesn't know anything about Asha's brother. He asks her for his whereabouts, but she admits that she doesn't know his precise location, although she assures him that he would recognize him right away because she is often told that they look alike, which is true, because the prince spots him almost immediately. His name is Arel, and he's in some kind of meeting, more of a confrontation rather, with 3 girls. The first girl asks Arel if he has considered her proposal with a harsh, serious tone. Arel starts to refuse, and the prince realizes that he's being bullied. The prince offers to help him, but Asha asks him to wait a moment, and eventually, the girls leave. Asha immediately confronts her brother, and he's shocked to see her. Asha inquires about those girls, complaining that he told her he was doing fine in the letters he sent her. The poor lad tries to explain to her, but Asha is being too overbearing, so he refuses to talk to her entirely. Asha is surprised, and Prince Arel realizes that he had never seen her this flustered, so he offers to talk to him on her behalf. The prince then proceeds to have a talk with Arel, bro to bro. He then reveals that he's actually his sister's boss. Arel is shocked to be talking with the third prince, but he tells him not to worry about that. He goes straight to the point and asks him if he was really being bullied by that bossy-looking young girl. Arel hesitates, but the prince assures him that he won't tell his sister. He even gives him a pinky promise. Arel reveals that the girl is actually Lady Hyla, the youngest daughter of Marquis Karet. Prince Arel recognizes the name as a noble who had a good reputation and had been at his coming-of-age ceremony. He offers to report her if she truly had been bullying the brother of the third prince's personal knight, but the boy immediately rejects it. A flashback reveals that, in reality, the girl was actually asking Arel, the young lad, to date her. Yep, as crazy as it sounds, that was the truth. Still in the flashback, in response to Haya's unreasonable request, Arel runs away from her, screaming that he didn't want to, and they were only 11 years old. Back to the present, the prince completely agrees with him. They were too young for that sort of thing. Arel complains that she keeps asking him out even though he outright rejected her, and then the other noble ladies are always teasing him on how cute he looks, treating him as a pet. He wasn't getting bullied, he was just troubled by how everyone teases him. The prince is surprised at how oblivious the young lad is. It was just a love quarrel between these little brats. He is disappointed. Arel admits that he doesn't know how to respond to this. Then the prince suggests that he start by asking her himself, pointing to young Lady Haya who had suddenly appeared behind him. Haya declares boldly that she came back because she had something to say to Arel, and then asks who the prince is. The prince casually replies that they're not strange people, and in fact the lady behind him was her future sister-in-law. He was referring to Asha. Arel screams that she's not, and Asha asks the prince what he meant by that, incredibly flustered. The prince then whispers something into her ear, while Arel begins to panic. Haya, on the other hand, recognizes Asha as Arel's big sister, and her attitude changes entirely, and she humbly introduces herself with a lot of courtesy. She then calmly requests to enter a relationship with her younger brother. The prince acknowledges her courage, while the rest of the gang is dumbfounded. Asha turns to Prince Arel, asking what she should do. The prince suggests that they leave them be, as long as she doesn't dislike the young lady. Asha is still worried, but the prince thinks that deep down Arel does have feelings for the lady, but he just doesn't know how to respond to her advances. After all, he didn't say that he hates her per se. He reasons that Arel is just rejecting her because of his pride. But left to be, what they have may blossom into something beautiful. Jokes aside, he also adds that their union would be beneficial to Asha's family, as Haya is from a nobility that possesses a remarkable talent for making profits from well-calculated investments. Although Asha isn't all that thrilled about that idea being a reason for dating, even so, the prince still insists that they let them be. If they truly are interested in each other, it'd be better to just trust her brother and see what happens. Asha finally concedes. Amidst the discussion, a male student suddenly interrupts them, asking if Arel was bothering Haya again. His name is Lord Luchin, and he's demanding to know why Iret had not learned his lesson and stopped trying to wheedle himself into Lady Haya's good graces. Haya immediately steps up and comes to Iret's defense, asking why the guy was so angry and revealing that it was her asking him out and not the other way around. But that was exactly Luchen's problem. She was rejecting him, and instead trying to get close to a runt like Iret. It becomes pretty clear to Prince Arel, all this was just a ridiculous love triangle. Luchen continues to argue, saying that Iret's house had fallen into ruin, and his sister had to go to work in the middle of nowhere. He adds that if she kept insisting on dating him, she might very well bring shame to her noble house. At this point, both our MC and his knight are starting to get irritated, as they're both labeled as the Lord of Nowhere and Working Sister respectively. Iret then steps up to face Luchen, saying that he had no right to insult Haya or his sister. Luchen is irritated and is preparing to land a solid punch, but is stopped midway by a much taller Prince Arel. Luchen notices the prince for the first time and asks who he is. The prince refers to himself as the hand of justice that will deal with his behavior. He had planned to just watch, but Luchen crossed a line. Luchen urged him to mind his business as he was an outsider. But the prince had official permission for entry, and was about to teach this brat some manners when yet another figure walked in, inquiring what all the fuss was about. The prince notices that too many people were beginning to gather here, while Luchen recognizes the new figure as Gattel, and judging by his size, he wasn't a teacher. Gattel goes further to politely ask who the prince is, and the prince gladly introduces himself, as he has been waiting for someone to ask. Gattel almost chokes. What the hell is the prince doing here? He politely suggests that they go somewhere private to talk. There, he apologizes and reveals that he is actually Luchen's big brother. He is also the first son of the family and a swordsmanship instructor at the academy. The prince reckons that Iret should be getting this apology, and not him. And Asha nods to it, but Gattel refuses to intervene as he heard that it was Iret who first caused trouble, and therefore he should be the one to apologize. Asha gets chills. She doesn't believe her brother did anything wrong. But to our prince, it actually starts to make sense. The love triangle at such an early age. The Royal Academy isn't just a place of learning, but also a place of forming social connections. Luchen was ordered by his family to approach Lady Haya. It's probably not one of the reasons for the establishment, but good intentions can get corrupted over time. Gattel continues to say that their house and that of Lady Haya were on good terms, and Iret has no right to intervene. Our protagonist is completely disgusted. He couldn't believe that Gattel calls himself an instructor. With rage, he asks if discrimination was an academic value in the institution. Gattel still refuses to budge. He cannot ignore the difference in class. He believes that forming relationships according to class is a duty of a noble. The prince then turns his words against him. Since Asha, Iret's elder sister, was his personal royal knight, that automatically puts her in a much higher class than him. He is speechless. Gattel tries to recover and says to just warn their respective families and end the matter then and there, but the prince refuses. RMC is angry. The prince decides that the only way to really resolve this issue is by using an old traditional method, used by nobles to settle disputes. Prince Arel is proposing a duel between Asha and Gattel, and their younger siblings. Gattel is about to refuse, but the prince cuts him short by adding the rewards and conditions of the duel. For the reward, the prince promised to not only take back everything he said, but also grant Gattel's family financial aid, which his family actually needed. The prince also agreed that the requirement for his victory is Asha and her brother winning, meaning that Gattel would be granted victory even if one of them loses. It was simply an offer Gattel couldn't refuse. He reckoned that Luchen was at least 2 years older than Iret, and he himself was the captain of the Order of Knights. That should give them enough of an advantage to secure at least one victory, or so he thought anyway. RMC happily seals the deal by swearing on his name as well as his royal family surname, and it was decided. Asha nearly passes out. Asha is reasonably mad at the prince. She says that she's normally quite lenient, but this time the prince went too far. The prince wonders how that's possible since she's literally always nagging him. He admits to being a little unreasonable, but he can't just let Gattel get away with this. Not only did he mock Iret, but he was completely disdainful toward her. He questions Asha if she's really going to overlook all of this. Asha, however, argues that she is his personal royal knight and should never fight on her personal behalf. But the prince counters, saying that looking down on his personal guard means looking down on him. He will not tolerate anyone insulting either him or his people. The prince knows she secretly wants to beat Gattel up and tells her to think of this as the perfect opportunity. And plus, her brother will also be watching, so this would be her chance to show him how amazing she is. This persuades Asha, and she finally accepts. Meanwhile, Iret is completely freaking out and trembling in his shoes. He believes that he can't possibly go after Lord Luchen, but the prince tells him to just strike first. He wants to argue, but the prince gets serious and advises him, He tells him that it looks like Lucian has been bullying him for some time. Ired admits that it makes him angry, but for the sake of his sister and the state of his family, he can't afford to act recklessly, so he had to endure and work on himself instead. The prince then asks him when he thinks he can break out from that kind of life. By the time he graduates, it'll be too late. If he continues to wait, he'll be keeping his head low for the rest of his life. This is his chance to show them what he's made of. He goes on to tell him that rushing without a plan will do him no good, but he shouldn't worry, because the third prince has his back. This alerts Iret, and he begins to get excited. Prince Arel then whispers a plan to guarantee his success. The reality is that a duel might sound noble, but it is actually barbaric. Despite the agreement, it is still quite violent. But there's nothing people enjoy more than looking at other people's problems. So it doesn't surprise the prince when a lot of children and teachers show up to watch the duels. Lady Heya meets up with the prince and tells him that she never agreed to any of this, and the prince apologizes for not telling her in advance, because he was too eager to beat them. She admits that she felt the same, but this wasn't a fair fight because Aret was no good with a sword. The prince then reveals to her that skills aren't necessary for winning. All you need is the right tricks. The prince uses this chance to ascertain whether Heya is truly interested in Aret or not. He asks her point blank, and she begins to fidget. She starts spilling out all sorts of reasons why she likes him, and blushing obviously like a girl on a first date. She thinks he's so cute that she could bite him. The prince realizes that the girl is just like him, and concludes that she's incredibly dangerous. Meanwhile, the two young boys are getting ready to fight. The referee gives the signal, and the match begins. Lucian takes the first move, screaming, "Die!" and pouncing toward Iret with incredible speed. Heya can hardly believe he's a noble. He is acting so much like an animal. Like a tiger that just found its prey. It seems like Iret is in big trouble. Well, until he's not. The prince suddenly starts sending him instructions, which he follows to the letter. He dodges, retreats, and swings exactly as he is instructed, then lands a hard blow on his opponent. Lucian's butt connects with the ground. The crowd murmurs that his stance might be awkward, but he somehow managed to get a hit. The prince is using a mini communication device to help Aret. Asha already knows what's going on, and our prince is enjoying himself. Predicting a child's movement is way too easy for him, as they only practice what they learn. He encourages Iret to keep following his instructions, and Aret agrees. Meanwhile, Lucian, now vexed, tries to attack again, this time from above. He's screaming angry insults and looks so scary that Aret panics a little. The prince tells him to calm down and gives him specific instructions to bend his waist and swing his sword upwards. Iret closes his eyes and does exactly as he's told. He lands a critical hit on a very private, sensitive spot on a man's body, which completely knocks out Lucian and leaves the crowd painfully shocked. Gattel accepts his loss, but he is suspicious of trickery and lets the prince know how dishonest it is, but our very nonchalant protagonist point-blank denies it. Gattel cannot prove anything, and even if he could, there was no rule against outside guidance, so he lets the matter go. Besides, it won't even matter as long as he wins the next one, right? Meanwhile, young Aret is proud of himself and runs to the prince's side. The prince congratulates him, and Haya runs to him, saying that she knew he'd win all along. The prince is surprised at how she didn't hesitate to state a blunt lie. She was so worried. Turning to his sister, Aret begins to worry. He remembers that her opponent Gattel was the captain of the 13th Order of Knights. The prince concurs with him, but it doesn't matter either way, because he is more than sure that Asha will win this fight. He tells the lad to watch carefully and see that his sister is not forcing herself to fight for the sake of her family. The match begins, and Gattel decides that he's not going to underestimate Asha. He's going to fight with full strength from the very beginning. He charges in for an attack. He knows he's always careful and doesn't go down easily, but something is wrong. Suddenly the room is spinning. No, it's not. He is the one spinning, flying across the room. Apparently, Asha had already sped in and struck while he was still thinking. He hadn't even noticed when she moved. It was only after he flew across the room and almost crashed through the arena walls that he realized he had been hit. Critically so. There was no getting up from that. Asha had actually also planned not to underestimate him, but she didn't even get the chance to, as the fight was over within mere seconds. Guess she ended up overestimating him instead. Asha sighs. She pleads that the prince at least let her know before starting something, but the prince is all smiles. After all, not only did she gain her brother's respect, but she got to see him one more time before the war. Also, she can rest well knowing that her brother won't get bullied anymore. He'd make sure of it. Asha smiles and agrees with him. She is very grateful. They both head back to Fahilia, feeling satisfied. When people are faced with a dire situation, they tend to fall into a state of denial. Back home, our protagonist realizes that some lords aren't seriously preparing for war, as they're worried war will never come, and dealing with all the resources and weapons they've gathered would be troublesome. They also criticize our protagonist, who's pulling out all the stops to prepare. His response to them is that he's just preparing for the worst possible scenario, but they don't listen and go on with their normal lives until they hear the news. In the Mirman Empire, the king openly declares an alliance between the Daimonial Kingdom and the Archduchy of Sheijapen. Their goal is to defeat an evil individual that sprouted in the Kingdom of Arnesia and has been wreaking havoc on their economy. This of course means war, and the individual being spoken of is no other than our boy, the third prince. The king of Arnesia trembles with rage when he receives the letter from the Three Territories Alliance. They demand that the country immediately cease paper production and destroy all paper-making machinery. The country should also share production methods for their goods and pay a fine for the profits they acquired unfairly. The king decides that it cannot be avoided at this point. War has begun. Sometime later, actual war breaks out. There is fighting on the outskirts of the kingdom. The first prince, Jael, realizes that the Three Territories Alliance is finally here. From scouts, he finds out that there are about 100,000 troops advancing toward the kingdom. As the heir to the throne, he decides that he must stop them there. So he takes charge and leads men into battle. Meanwhile, back in Fahilia, everyone is on high alert. There are no orders to mobilize yet, but they are well aware that the battle has begun, and our MC is also very busy. He is busy cooking happily with Dia. Today's menu is roasted rabbit meat. The prince and his personal magician enjoy themselves over small talk. Once they're done, he decides to make another meal using flour and dried fruits. Dia notices how good of a cook Prince Arel is. Then he reveals to her that he'd often dream of just running away to the south and becoming a cook. The meal is done and their field rations. Dia notices that they are tasty and high in calories, and the prince reveals that he wanted something the soldiers could eat quickly and still have quality. He tried making them just in case he had to eat them himself. But Dia points out that he hasn't even been asked to mobilize yet, and the prince tells her it's just in case. Yes, just in case. Back on the battlefield, things are starting to heat up. The enemy has already begun climbing the walls of the kingdom. Prince Jael is trying his best to keep them at bay while they wait for reinforcements. Then news arrives that the main army, numbering more than twice the first wave, is approaching. The first prince is dumbfounded. The enemy just arrived. Meanwhile, at the castle, it's a royal mess in the royal conference room, and the king is tired of it. The enemy's numbers keep increasing, and Prince Jael's safety is at risk. The king decides to withdraw the front line and regroup. He declares that every lord and noble must join the war. It's a nationwide draft. Normally, royalty is never sent to the battlefield, but Prince Jael wanted to prove himself, so there he is. Prince Arel has just received the orders from the king. He's been expecting this. A 3-to-1 war is too much to handle after all. Our MC knows that the kingdom's survival is essential to living his dream sweet life. He has no choice. He has to become a war professional. He leaves only the minimum number of soldiers behind to defend the territory and prepares to head to the battlefield. It's been a while since he saw Frey, the griffin. He's all grown now and needs to start pulling his weight. He senses Kania and tells her to stay back, but she refuses. She's stubborn as usual. The prince is aware of his sister's strength, but he just can't send his own family member to war. But she herself isn't comfortable sending her brother to battle alone. She insists that siblings must stick together. He finally concedes. He then reveals a gift from Kania's mother. A very majestic sword passed down in her battle family for generations, named Keltia, after the first head. Kania is unsure of her worthiness, but the prince assures her that she deserves it. He then leaves her alone for some time, as she's starting to get a bit sentimental. The third prince of Arnesia, Prince Arel, decides that he's going to reduce the casualties of this war as much as possible. Those who fight will be rewarded, and those who fall will have their families taken care of. Whilst trying not to let people see his fear, he tells them he doesn't want anyone to sacrifice themselves, but to defend the kingdom through valiant deeds, and the march to the front line begins. They arrive at the northeastern battlefront to see injured soldiers everywhere. It's been a truly fierce battle. They immediately speak with Prince Jael, who admits that he has failed as a commander. Our MC doesn't really blame him though. He did his best against soldiers thrice their size. He has a good heart, unlike his mother, the queen. Things aren't looking good. The enemy has seized their border fortress, and 320,000 troops are currently attacking them. They've stopped temporarily to regroup, but will resume their attack tomorrow. Prince Arel realizes that if he had been just a few days late, this place might have already fallen. The first prince decides to use the 23,000 soldiers Prince Arel brought to stall for time while they wait for reinforcements. But our protagonist doesn't like the idea of his carefully trained soldiers being disposed of like that. He proposes a better idea, to attack right now instead of waiting for tomorrow. He then shows the first prince what he brought with him, something the dwarves had been working on. A siege tower. Archers and magicians are stationed inside, and they attack from within. It can also be dismantled, transported, and reassembled by the dwarves who came along. Prince Jael is pleasantly surprised, but that isn't all. Our protagonist still has more tricks up his sleeve. Next, He introduces the spear wagon, which has a shield with spears on it, used for both offense and defense. They could focus on defense while Prince Jael and his troops go all out on offense. It is time for a counterattack. At the enemy's base, the three generals of the alliance are discussing. The first battle went well, but the resistance is getting stronger. They start to worry a bit, until one of them reveals that the individual responsible for the war is literally fighting on the front lines. Prince Arel. He wants to see what the boy is truly made of. Another worries about his safety, but the first assures him that he remembers the agreement. They're planning to crush the kingdom of Arnesia. At the same time, in the midst of battle, our protagonist is leading his army of 23,000 against an enemy more than twice its size, with a shield-like formation. The enemy thinks they're cowards for hiding behind their shields, but they stop smiling when a rain of arrows suddenly descends on them from Arel's army. They take a hit, and then adapt by raising their shields to avoid the arrows and keep on advancing. Soon they clash. There's a clear difference between dwarven-made weapons and the enemies. They use the spear wagon to break through the enemy's defenses while maintaining formation. Soon the surroundings are stained with the enemy's blood. They try to retreat, but they have been cornered. They then resort to their magicians, as they're more powerful than ordinary soldiers. The magicians start casting, but their magic turns off like a lit candle in the wind. The enemy is confused. They soon realize that Arel's army also includes magicians hiding behind the siege tower and dispelling their magic. Dia is there as well, and she thinks the enemies must have poorly trained magicians, because the magic being dispelled was so weak. The enemy magicians are relieved because dispel magic drains mana quickly, so they won't have enough to cast offensive spells. They only realize how wrong they are when bolts of lightning strike from nowhere. Turns out that Arel already planned for this, which was why he possessed very rare mana stones that store mana. The enemy is dumbfounded. Their numbers are reducing fast, so they have to flee. Out of the 50,000 soldiers, only 20,000 manage to escape. Our protagonist has won. He admits that war is never pleasant, no matter if you win, and asks Asha and Sena not to pursue them, but instead gather up injured soldiers as prisoners, regroup, and stay vigilant. He really just wants to have fun, not wars. The first prince is so happy with his younger brother and tries to praise him, but our protagonist somehow manages to attribute the credit to luck and back to the first prince, which he moronically accepts. Our protagonist just wants an easy life, not war achievements or credit. He'd happily give that away. It is now time for the first prince to lead the offensive attack as previously planned. No better time than now. They're licking their wounds, and their morale is probably low. Prince Arel encourages him to do as he sees fit, and he leaves. Meanwhile, our MC will just lay back in the rear, relaxing and being completely idle for now. The kingdom's main army, led by Prince Jael, launches a full-blown attack. Because Arel's army had already critically weakened the enemy's forces, they are able to focus all their power on attack only. To counter the numerical advantage of the enemy, the kingdom's army uses ferocious ambushes from the flanks and the rear. Behind all this chaos, back in the rear, is our nonchalant protagonist and his guards, enjoying life over a very delicious meal. It's been a while since they had good food. He offers Kania some rabbit meat, but she passes. Asha voices her complaints about them dining while others are fighting for their lives, but Sena tells her that it's the shameless who survive on the battlefield. And Prince Arel happily agrees. Thanks to his tactics and equipment, his army gained a reputation as a slow-moving but impenetrable defense force, which served as a good reason to position him and his army in the rear. Because he attacked them first, the enemy was now wary of him. He could not risk attacking them again, so he decides to take the day off. War can wait. The prince begins to worry that Dia isn't sleeping in a comfortable position. She had done nearly all the work of the magicians during the battle, and was quite exhausted, but insisted on eating before resting, which led to her collapsing mid-dining. The prince decides they should all get as much rest as they can today, for things are about to get really busy. Meanwhile, at the enemy's base, the commander is getting worried. They know Prince Jael is inexperienced but troublesome. Yet he's not the problem here. That counterattack caught them off guard. They really thought that Prince Arel was just a merchant, but he managed to wipe out 60% of their army with only half the number. War is supposed to be about experience and understanding what needs to be done, but somehow, a 16-year-old with no experience whatsoever got the best of them. And more puzzling still, he insists on staying in the rear. The commander knows that with his abilities, the third prince could easily turn the tides of this battle. The next day, Arel and his army leave to join the kingdom's main army in order to reclaim the border fortress that had been captured by the enemy. Midway, the prince decides to cut their speed and slow down. He suspects that an ambush may be awaiting them. Kania asks him why, so he gives her the reasoning behind his thinking. He knows the enemy won't make the same mistake of attacking them head-on, so it only makes sense that they'd wait for them along the path they're taking. If they're really planning to attack him, he decides to screw them over first. Just as the prince predicted, there is an ambush waiting for him and his army. The enemy is getting confused as to why they're late. They finally arrive and the ambush starts. But no, Prince Arel and his army are already ready for them. Defense barriers are up, and the attack is on standby until the moment of impact. Before the ambushers can realize what's going on, hordes of attacks have already begun descending on them, and their magic has been completely dispelled. It's no use. They try to retreat, but numerous bear traps and an angry Sena are waiting for them along the path they came from. Sena sends a message from the prince to them, saying that they should be prepared for the consequences of starting a fight, as she pummels each and every one of them. One dumb soldier tries to attack her head-on, believing he couldn't possibly lose to a woman. He doesn't last seconds before he is sent hurling toward the ground. Asha later meets up with her after having defeated the rest. This was a very easy win for both of them. The prince's strategy was not to make them avoid his army out of fear, but because they were simply too much to handle. He wanted them to become a nuisance, a thorn in the enemy's side, too troublesome to deal with. The ambushers from the Three Territories Alliance were completely annihilated. Afterwards, the army of Fahilia led by our protagonist successfully reclaims the Bother Fortress. The enemy tried launching several attacks after that, but they couldn't break though the now morally boosted army, most especially because Kania was fighting with them. The enemy had thought that the power of Princess Kania was exaggerated, but unfortunately it wasn't the case, as she was striking down men left and right. Months have passed since the war began, and the enemy's momentum is failing, and Arnesia's victory is assured. As it stands, Arel's forces has about 121 dead, 142 severely injured and 192 lightly injured. A very good result compared to other lords. It does not please our boy in the slightest. At the enemy's base they reckon that they can't break through the defenses in the northeast, and it was reckless to keep depleting soldiers, so they decide to withdraw. Frustratingly, they make a very decisive decision to give this battle everything they've got. Arel realizes that it's been too quiet lately. The enemy had ceased their non-stop attacks to claim the fortress. His strategy to focus on defense while other territories harassed the enemy resulted in his army suffering the most minimal casualties. He tells himself that the weather was too peaceful for people to die. The Three Territories Alliance was desperately trying to protect their interest and prevent his kingdom from achieving dominance. They too were also driven by their own personal goals. The lords who had been passive now commanded their soldiers to kill. Now the tides of the war had turned in their favor. Prince Jael was trying to distinguish himself as the future king. It was all ambition. Whether good or bad, ambition is what drives war. Humans grow though it. They strive for more. The prince couldn't really complain, since he too had his own ambitions. But what humans don't understand is that no matter how high you climb, the view of the sky will never change. Asha interrupts his chain of thoughts. She asks him to please act with dignity while in front of soldiers. It is then revealed that all this while our protagonist had been lying on the ground in the midst of staring soldiers, just daydreaming. The prince insists that less dignity makes life simpler, and urges her to give it a try, but she passes. She then states her observations about the recent reduce in attacks, and the prince concurs, saying that it has been 6 days with no action. Asha expresses her wish for the war to just end this way. Prince Arel then notices that the enemy might be up to something, so he whistles, and in an instant, Frey lands in front of him, and he gets on. Asha tries to stop him, but he promises her to back soon and then zooms off. Just as he thought, he notices something from the air. He then communicates with Asha and tells her to call Sena. Apparently the war was far from over. Back at camp, the prince has a meeting with his personal guards. He asks them what they think the enemy would do next. Sena suggests that they may attack again, but Asha just warns the prince about taking off carelessly. The prince hurriedly agrees without giving it much thought and then turns to Sena. He tells her that the enemy had already pulled back, so they cannot possibly attack again. Sena doesn't think they'd surrender, and the prince agrees but still questions her thought. But Asha replies this time, saying it was because of their pride. The prince also agrees to this and playfully hands Asha a cookie for getting the right answer. The prince states that the war began with the enemy, and they can't just run now, for they openly made up lies and declared war, so they can't just cover it up as a misunderstanding. It would damage their people's opinion. In this case, the most obvious move for them would be to mobilize their entire nation, including slaves. That would be dangerous, as their number could triple. If they thought the last army was big, imagine 3 times that size. However, our young protagonist won't just sit back and take it. As a pro in many lives, our boy cannot lose composure even when faced with 1,000,000 soldiers. He has a secret weapon that only he and King Aiken knows about. He pulls out a massive crossbow, designed to shoot 100 specially forged Fahilia bolts per minute, a weapon beyond even the royal researchers. Asha states that the weapon will be very useful. Our prince had not wanted to make this kind of advanced equipment yet, but this time he's got no choice. His enemies try to take what's theirs, so it's only right he returns the favor. After some time, at the Arnesia defensive line, a commander leads Arnesian troops for an attack on the quiet enemy, in an effort to gain recognition by the king. However, what they meet leave them utterly dumbfounded. Hundreds of thousands of the enemy's troops, rushing towards them at max speed. They immediately turn and begin to fall back. The enemy had gathered all the soldiers they could find, including slaves, and launched an all-out attack. Prince Jael and his army are ready to defend the fortress they had just claimed. He must stop them no matter what. Meanwhile, the enemy tries to use magic, but they still can't because of the Arnesia's soldiers' resistance. No matter though, they expected it. They withdraw their magicians and send more soldiers, who are charged with breaching the defensive line at all cost. They can always replenish soldiers lost in battle, as long as they win, but the Arnesian soldiers are not retreating. This is worrying the commander of the enemy forces. As he's still contemplating, a swift blot barely misses him by a few inches. As he is still trying to figure out where the bolt came from, he looks up in horror. The sky is filled with a rain of huge high-speeding bolts that came from a far distance. He looks with terror as his men are falling down left and right. Just as he's starting to think that they might endure it, Prince Jael and his army appear from behind. If they try to advance, the bolts would strike them. And if they try to retreat, the army of Prince Jael would strike them. Our genius MC thinks that the enemy's commander must hate his guts, and he has never been more right. He notices how the enemy was getting too cautious to move. He understands though, even shields couldn't withstand one fierce bolt. He communicates with the base, asking them about the supply of bolts, and they respond that they're not running out anytime soon. As powerful as the crossbows were, they still had their flaws. They are complex machinery that needs maintenance and reloading, making quick operation impossible. And there's the bolt. Each was specially forged and they are wasting all of them. It is draining his money. He then receives a call from Dia, and she reports that the enemy magicians had all been depleted of mana. He then asks her if they can spare any magic stones for an attack, and she replies that they can spare all but 20%, and she could handle the dispelling alone. But the prince thinks that would be a waste of a 6th-class magician like her. During this discussion, the prince, who had been on Frey, flying in the air all this while, spots that the cavalry were retreating. It's the perfect chance, and he orders Dia to burn them all to the ground, and Dia does as so. She casts the Mana House, the same spell that Arel had used to grow crops in his territory. It served as a trap, capturing groups of soldiers at a time. Then she uses fire magic to completely reduce them to ashes. Prince Arel's main strategy was to reduce casualties as much as possible, while delivering a devastating blow to the enemy. From above, the enemy looks terrified. The prince wishes they'd just run away already. He then sends word to his brother, Jael, and tells him to use this momentum to launch a full-scale attack on the enemy. The Arnesia Kingdom's army continues to achieve victory and turns the tides of the war. The emperor of the Mirman Empire is very upset. He was at a meeting with the king of the Demanial Kingdom, and archduke of the Archduchy of Chejapan, via communication crystals. He blames them for failure even after the general mobilization order. The king tells him not to allocate blame and asks the duke what he thinks would happen next. The duke tells them that honestly, they were already close to defeat. They had lost nearly half of their forces, and counting. Even with their remaining troops, they stand no chance against the weapons of Arnesia. The weapon made by Prince Arel, a craftsman, called the creator of that weapon a beast of genius. They had the advantage in numbers. They carefully planned their strategies, even went it over repeatedly before starting the war. Arel Arnesia was a troublesome bastard. They need time to find some kind of weakness in the enemy somehow. Just then, a servant interrupts them with highly urgent news about the Arnesian army.